You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 7th of August 2013. Gibraltar, the party is over, comments from Madrid raise concerns in London. Khalifa Foundation announces completion of UAE-funded Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Oxford. Judge calls victim 13 a sexual predator, suspends paedophile's 8-month sentence. Home Office under fire as Liberty's alternative immigration campaign hits streets of London. The Maltese affair. Is EU Home Affairs Commissioner complicit in human trafficking? Outrage as Swiss move to segregate asylum seekers. Official, Israel capable of unilateral strike in Iran if US not committed. Al-Qaeda threat, US officials fear ingenious liquid explosive. Thought for the day, should we listen to the researchers? And finally, from below, the blob invades London. UK news. Gibraltar, the party is over comments from Madrid raise concerns in London. Foreign Office vows to safeguard British sovereignty over rock after Spanish minister escalates row promising a harder line. The Foreign Office voiced concern on Sunday night following comments from the Spanish Foreign Minister which appear to suggest Madrid is preparing to take a harder line in the escalating dispute over Gibraltar. In an interview with the Spanish newspaper ABC, José García Margallo criticised the conciliatory stance taken by the previous government towards the Mediterranean outposts, saying, "The party is over." The minister suggested a €50 fee could be imposed on every vehicle entering or leaving the territory, known as the Rock, via the border with Spain. The minister said the proceeds would be used to help Spanish fishermen affected by damage to fishing grounds allegedly caused by Gibraltarian authorities. Such a fee would be punitive cost on residents who regularly commute to Spain for work. Spain is also considering closing its airspace to flights heading to Gibraltar and changing the law so that online gaming companies operating from the British Overseas Territory have to use Spanish servers and come under the jurisdiction of Madrid's taxation regime, García Margallo said. He also indicated that the Spanish tax authorities may launch an investigation into property owned by about 6,000 Gibraltarians in neighbouring parts of Spain as part of its EU obligations to control fiscal irregularities. Khalifa Foundation announces completion of UAE-funded Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Oxford. Abu Dhabi, as part of its core vision to proliferate culture, tradition and religious understanding in different parts of the world, the Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan Foundation, KBZF, has announced the completion of Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Oxford, England. The mosque, which has been funded by the United Arab Emirates, aims at propagating places of worship and culture, inviting people of various cultures and backgrounds to understand the vital tenets of Islamic faith and tradition and encouraging embracing other cultures regardless of their backgrounds. Islam is one of the most growing and widespread religions in the world. It's part of the Foundation's ambition to facilitate education about this noble faith and help to create an environment for all to understand it more, said Mohammed Haji Al-Khoury, General Director of KBZF. We're actively involved in planting structures and monuments in various parts of the world, not only to help Muslims but also to serve non-Muslims by educating them about Islam's principles and aspects including religious tolerance, he added. Al-Khoury also stressed on that the Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Oxford is not only a religious monument or a place of worship, but also a breeding ground for ideas and meeting of minds where discussions and productive dialogue can be prompted. Additionally, the project will also house ample research facilities and an extensive library containing some of the most popular literature, which includes the fundamental precepts of the Arabs. The library will be managed by the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, an institute that has been certified and awarded the Royal Charter from Queen Elizabeth. Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Oxford is one of the many initiatives announced by the Foundation in the spirit of Ramadan. World at 8 states, "Get beyond the publicity speak and the true message comes out. We will build anywhere we like, we will spread Islam, and we will even get the British elite to sanctify it under the name of diversity. What fools we are in the UK. Judge calls victim 13 a sexual predator and suspends paedophile's 8-month sentence. Attorney General is to consider whether to ask Court of Appeal if suspended 8-month jail sentence imposed by Judge Nigel Peters on confessed paedophile Neil Wilson was unduly lenient. Neil Wilson, 41, faces having his 8-month suspended jail sentence reviewed after the Attorney General Dominic Grieve agreed to look into the case yesterday. And the Crown Prosecution Services was forced to admit that its own prosecutor, Robert Culliver, acted inappropriately when he placed a portion of the responsibility upon the victim in court. In sentencing, Judge Nigel Peters apparently accepted the suggestions that Wilson's teenage victim, who cannot be named for legal reasons, was complicit in the abuse, despite her being well below the age of consent. The girl was accused in court of egging her abuser on, and was described as looking older than her 13 years, something the judge said he would consider in Wilson's favour. Wilson was told by Judge Nigel Peters that he had taken into account the fact that his child victim looked older during sentencing at Snaresbrook Crown Court on Monday. He added, "You have come as close to prison as imaginable. I have taken into account that even though the girl was 13, the prosecution say she looked and behaved a bit older. On these facts, the girl was predatory and was egging you on." A spokesman for the Attorney General's office confirmed that the case will be considered by the law officer, the Attorney or Solicitor General, who will decide whether it should be referred to the Court of Appeal under the unduly lenient sentence scheme. A CPS spokesperson said, "The language used by prosecution counsel was inappropriate. The transgressor in this case was the defendant and he bears responsibility for his criminal acts." World at 8 says, "This man has been prosecuted for bestiality and indecent images in the past and is not an innocent. He should have been imprisoned or whipped and put in public stocks. The victim is under age, beginning and end of." Home Office under fire as Liberty's alternative immigration campaign hits streets of London. Human rights campaigners have hit back at the government's go-home ad vans with an alternative message on immigration. Liberty has sent a van around the streets of London with the slogan, "Stirring up tension and division in the UK illegally, Home Office think again." Last month, Home Office ads displayed on billboards carried by vans in 6 London boroughs told overstaying migrants, "Go home or you'll be picked up and deported." Liberty's van will circle the Home Office, Westminster and the surrounding area before visiting Kensal Green and Walthamstow, 2 of the London boroughs thought to be targeted during the spot checks. Taking the message to the streets, Liberty's alternative message on immigration, a statement from Liberty said the Home Office's messaging had racist connotations, mirroring National Front slogans from the 1970s. Elsewhere, Conservative Mayor of London Boris Johnson has admitted the language on the vans could have been friendlier. Speaking on LBC 97.3 with Nick Ferrari, Boris the Lorist said, "The language could be friendlier. What we're really saying is, are you illegal? Do you need to regularise your status? Do you need help getting home? And here's the number." That seems a perfectly reasonable thing to say. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, EHRC, said it will probe the reported spot checks as well as the controversial Go Home campaign. Users of the Refugee and Migrant Forum of East London, RAMFEL, represented by law firm Dayton Pierce Glynn, have told the Home Office it has until August the 8th to agree to ditch the offensive campaign or they will apply for a judicial review. Labour peer Lord Lipsey has reported the ads to the Advertising Standards Authority, while the union Unite said the government's campaign was vile and it was seeking legal advice over the vans. World at 8 comments, "You can see the purveyors of diversity enrichment are up in arms over an enrichment thing. If we as a country don't start some sort of way to stop immigration and deport illegals, the situation will get so bad that even the idiots in charge will have to do something more intrusive. This is the first of what should be many initiatives to sort our country out. There's nothing sensitive about being overrun." European news. The Maltese affair. Is EU Home Affairs Commissioner complicit in human trafficking? Malta, which has for several days been in a standoff with EU Home Affairs Commissioner Cecilia Malmström over the fate of 102 migrants rescued by the Liberian oil tanker Salamis, has won one small skirmish in their battle against the EU's enforced immigration overload. Although it is a Pyrrhic victory of sorts, the skirmish was won only because Italy has agreed to take in 102 migrants rescued from a leaking dinghy after Malta refused to admit them despite EU pressure. The migrants, including a 5-month-old baby and 4 pregnant women, were rescued from their badly damaged inflatable boat on Monday by the Liberian-flagged Salamis oil tanker 80 kilometres off the Libyan coast. In a statement released overnight on Wednesday, Malta said the Salamis, which had been moored off the Mediterranean island nation in international waters, was heading for Syracuse in Sicily. This development came as the Italian authorities accepted to welcome the migrants who were aboard the MV Salamis. It followed diplomatic contacts between the Italian, Maltese and Greek governments, the government said. It said Prime Minister Joseph Muscat personally thanked Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta. In earlier statements, EU Home Affairs Commissioner Cecilia Malmström said, "It is first and foremost important to save the lives of the rescued persons," noting the ship contains 4 pregnant women, 1 injured woman as well as a 5-month-old baby. She said Malta, which has refused to allow the tanker to enter its waters, would be acting contrary to international law if it sent it back to Libya. The drama started to unfold Monday morning when the tanker, a Liberian-flagged vessel operated by Greek company Hellenic Shipping, rescued 102 migrants off the coast of Libya after being requested to do so by the Italian authorities. According to Maltese media, the tanker, in accordance with international law, was instructed to take the migrants to the nearest port of call, which was Libya. But the captain of the ship decided to continue to Malta anyway, where he was told by the government that as the migrants were not in danger, the tanker would be refused entry. Malmström said that while she recognised the migratory pressure faced by the tiny Mediterranean island, the EU's smallest member state, it is the humanitarian duty of the Maltese authorities to allow these persons to disembark. World at 8 comments. It sounds to me as if Cecilia Malmström and the Salamis captain are complicit in human trafficking, as the captain did not take those rescued to the nearest port and Malmström supports his actions rather than the actions of an EU member state. Here we have immigrants coming before the citizens of the EU and international law is contravened to ensure it is so. Outrage as Swiss move to segregate asylum seekers. The BBC is reporting that some Swiss towns plan to keep asylum seekers away from public places such as swimming pools, playing fields and libraries in a move human rights groups say is racist. The curbs are aimed at preventing tensions with residents, officials say. Asylum seekers are to be housed in special centres, many former army barracks, and the first one is opened in the town of Bremgarten. Switzerland's share of asylum seekers is well above the European average. The BBC's Imogen Fawkes in Geneva says the controversy reflects growing voter unease at the number of asylum seekers in Switzerland, per head of population amongst the highest in Europe. Currently about 48,000 people are seeking asylum in Switzerland. Roman Staub, mayor of the town of Menzingen, has said asylum seekers should be banned from sensitive areas, such as the vicinity of a school. This is certainly a very difficult area because here asylum seekers could meet our schoolchildren, young girls or young boys, he said. In Bremgarten, a church will also be off-limit to asylum seekers. Human rights groups are outraged, calling the measures racist. The BBC's correspondent reports. The government says the rules are not formal bans on movement, but admits its own Department of Immigration agreed the restrictions with town councils. In June, voters overwhelmingly backed a controversial move to tighten asylum restrictions amid a spike in the number of refugees in the country. Switzerland counts 1 asylum seeker for every 332 inhabitants. The European average is 1 asylum seeker for every 625 inhabitants. World at 8 says, the Swiss have always been bright. It's a good thing they decided long ago not to join the European Union, otherwise they'd have had to kowtow to the asylum seekers' human rights. I always thought it was almost impossible to go and live in Switzerland, owing to the price of property and their laws, so how come asylum seekers can get in anyway? World News. Official, Israel capable of unilateral strike on Iran if US not committed. Israel is capable of carrying out a unilateral military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities without operational support from the United States, a senior Israeli official said to Israel Radio on Tuesday morning. Although such a strike would be less effective than one conducted by America, the unidentified official said. The diplomatic official doubted US intentions to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons at all costs. American conduct regarding Syria, contrary to declarations by President Barack Obama, shows Israel that it cannot rely on US assurances, the Israeli source said. Israel fears the development of direct negotiations between Washington and Tehran would ease sanctions on the Islamic Republic in exchange for concessions and would not satisfy the requirements imposed by Israel, the unnamed official added. Jerusalem and Washington differed on Sunday over the significance of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's inauguration, with Washington ready to work with Iran and Jerusalem warning that the new regime, like the old, is a threat to world peace. On Friday, the Iranian president said Israel had been a wound on the body of the Islamic world, Netanyahu said at the opening of the weekly cabinet meeting. Al-Qaeda threat. US officials fear ingenious liquid explosive. There are growing concerns that an Al-Qaeda affiliate could use a new generation of liquid explosive, currently undetectable, in a potential attack, according to two senior US government officials briefed on the terror threat that has prompted the closing of nearly 24 US embassies. The Transportation Security Administration has long been concerned about liquid explosives being used in potential devices, as it was during the failed Christmas Day bombing in 2009. The new tactic allows terrorists to dip ordinary clothing into the liquid to make the clothes themselves into explosives once dry. It's ingenious, one of the officials said. Another senior official said that the tactic would not be detected by current security measures. The official said the new technique is believed to have been developed by the Yemen-based Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, home to notorious alleged bomb maker Ibrahim al-Assari. Al-Assari is suspected of being the mastermind behind several devious explosive devices, including the underwear bomb and surgically implanted body bombs. Thought for the day: should we listen to the researchers? There was research from a group of medical ethicists linked to Oxford University, that great seat of Marxism and School of Common Purpose thoughts, and it was truly terrible. The article was printed in 2012 but received little publicity. Now, I'm not an inveterate baby or child lover. I love my own and occasionally see a baby or child who is truly lovable, but for the most part other people's children are noisy and in the way as far as I'm concerned. I was brought up to be seen and not heard, whereas nowadays even quite young children can't enjoy themselves without screaming their heads off all the time. But this aside, even I cannot wholly condone what this article says, or rather what it opens the doors to. It states that if a child is born disabled, then killing it would be equivalent to an abortion, and it's written by Professor Julian Savulescu, director of the Oxford Uehiro Centre for Practical Ethics, and he promotes a liberal society. Newborns are termed potential persons, and they call it after-birth abortion. They give the person or baby to mean an individual who is capable of attributing to her own existence some, or at least basic value, that being deprived of this existence represents a loss to her. Now, a point here is they refer to the baby as her, not her or him, and the child pictured is a beautiful, normal white baby, not a Down syndrome or thalidomide child, but a normal baby. We have, according to researchers, become more civilised in this century, and certainly in the last 200 years our society has become more developed in the care of birthing and lessening of our mortality rates. But we appear to be taking a step backwards, which is especially dangerous in the light of the thousands of immigrant births we are having to accommodate. And that is, we are promoting white abortions and now the killing or after-birth abortions of obviously disabled babies. Now, as a woman fortunate enough not to have problems conceiving and producing fairly normal children, I feel that I am lucky. But many years ago, and I mean the turn of the last century, the problems of having a disabled child, whether Downs or physically disabled, didn't seem to arise quite so much. The reason being family doctors, local midwives or home births. Whether we like it or not, thousands of poor little odd children never made it out of the birthing room due to midwives, doctors and well-meaning family members. In those days there were no benefits to having a disabled child surviving, no council care, no free special schools and no finances for special care. If you were very poor, it was another mouth to feed, and if you were wealthy, the line would continue with another child. If of royal blood, then some survived only to be locked away. Abortions were not on demand then, the pill was not available, so women just had another baby in most cases. Apparently only 64% of Down syndrome babies are diagnosed before birth in Europe, and the argument from these researchers is that the remaining numbers could be dealt with in this way. Now, on a personal level, I'm not a Downs person. I know I couldn't have coped with a child with this disability and find the pressure from the elite to give birth and bring up a Downs child very odd in the extreme. There are of course varying degrees of Downs, some barely visible and some poor children have it to a terrible degree. It isn't civilised in my book to have facial operations on your child with Downs to make it fit in with society. That is almost as bad as killing it after birth. At least just after birth the baby is ignorant of life, but this doesn't make it a desirable path to follow at all. Take the thalidomide scandal. Many of these children are beautiful looking and come from educated homes. I say this because I was pregnant at that time and was prescribed this drug privately to stop morning sickness. Luckily for my daughter I was so sick I couldn't keep that down either, but my point being it was an expensive drug at the time and many people fortunately could not afford it. Now these poor babies were obviously sometimes severely disabled at birth, but of course their brains were not touched, just their bodies. Many years ago, apart from the fact the drug companies were not so powerful, this drug would not have been available and limbless babies would have probably been smothered at birth. Sad, but true. Now as a nation, and indeed Europe, the UK and the world is overcrowded. There are just too many people. I'll deal with the UK as the world and Europe can look after themselves. There are too many people in the United Kingdom and too many births, and most of the rise in births are from immigrant mothers, especially in our capital city London and our larger cities nationally. Fact. Another fact is that we in the UK abort huge numbers of our own every year, and this number is increasing. In 2011 there were just under 200,000 abortions carried out, of which only 1% were to prevent the birth of a disabled child. Classed as non-residents visiting NHS tourists, 6,000 abortions were carried out. Of course the main bulk of our immigrant mothers are not classed as non-resident. Apparently it costs £300,000 annually to process the forms and produce these stats as well. Now whilst we are busy using abortion as a birth control and decimating both the childbearing propensities of our female youth with drink and disease, the immigrant mothers, especially Islamic ones, are doing the opposite, but with equally disastrous results for us as a society. You'll be pleased to learn that inbreeding amongst British Muslims is threatening the health of their children, a leading geneticist has warned. In this report from 2011, Professor Steve Jones from University College London said the common practice in Islamic communities for cousins to marry each other increased the risk of birth defects. There may be some evidence that cousins marrying one another can be harmful, he told an audience at the Hay Festival. We should be concerned about that as there can be a lot of hidden genetic damage. Children are more likely to get 2 copies of a damaged gene. Bradford is very inbred. There's a huge amount of cousins marrying each other there. Studies have shown that 55% of British Pakistanis are married to first cousins, and in Bradford this rises to 75%. Other research has found that children of first cousins are 10 times more likely to have recessive genetic disorders and face deafness, blindness and infant mortality. But of course Professor Jones' comments provoked anger amongst some Muslim groups. Well, it would, wouldn't it? Never before has a group of people so successfully fleeced any nation it invades as the Muslims. They are past masters at it, and whilst occupying our land, why don't they come under the same sort of research that wants them to do away with their disabled babies after birth? Or do these babies have human rights that don't seem to exist for the rest of us indigenous peoples, according to researchers from Oxford University? Mohammed Shafiq, chief executive of the Ramadan Foundation and the Muslim spin doctor who promotes the image of Muslims in Britain, said, "I know many Muslims who have married their cousins and none of them have had a problem with their children. Obviously we don't want any child to be born disabled who don't need to be born disabled, so I would advise genetic screening before first cousins marry." But I find Steve Jones' comments unworthy of a professor. Using language like inbreeding to describe cousins marrying is completely inappropriate and further demonises Muslims. No, it doesn't. It's about as politically correct as referring to people from the southern United States as inbred rednecks, hillbillies or trailer trash. The inference is the same, and in the case of both probably true. As to the screening, rather difficult in Pakistan, where many of these arranged marriages are set up years before and carried out to bring the spouse into the UK with all of its benefits. Muslims do intermarry, which is why a vast majority set up the business of grooming underage non-Muslim girls for their sons and male relations to avoid the problem of having too many idiots. They shouldn't really worry because in all cases it is us Brits in the UK who are directly or indirectly funding these souls and the financial benefits to those families that come from being an immigrant Muslim and giving birth to one or two retards, and I use that word deliberately and will not apologise for it. As usual, we can publicise and write about the abortion and afterbirth killings when they don't refer to the Muslim population, and concern about the risks to children from first cousin marriages has been described as the last great taboo. Former Environment Minister Phil Woolas was rebuked by Downing Street in 2008 for saying British Pakistanis are fuelling rates of birth defects by marrying their cousins, with the spokesman for the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown saying the issue was not one for ministers to comment on. If not our ministers, who, pray? As usual, Mohammed Salim Khan, Chief Executive of the Bradford Council for Mosques, said, "It's important to discuss these issues, but I do not know of any firm evidence backing up Professor Jones' claims. I think we need more conclusive studies so we can know for certain if there's any genuine risk. Marriages between cousins is certainly common within South Asia, but it is becoming less so in Britain and also in Bradford. Islam allows you to marry anyone you want, so in many ways Islam promotes diversity. As you can guess, this is a load of complete and utter bollocks and a free pass to breed us off the face of the earth." In his talk, Professor Jones said inbreeding was not confined to Muslims and historically had occurred in every part of society, including the royal family. He said, "We are all more incestuous than we realise. In Northern Ireland lots of people share the same surname, which suggests a high level of inbreeding. There's a lot of surname diversity in London. But if you look at the Outer Hebrides, there are rather fewer surnames in relation to the number of people." No, Jones, no. Inbreeding in this day and age and in this country is confined mainly to Muslims. The royal family in days of old might well have been inbred, but are now apparently celebrating marrying commoners willy-nilly, and you can't get much more common than the Middletons, and I'll skirt over the subject of Prince Harry. As for Outer Hebrides, that hardly applies to mainland Britain. Who cares about the Outer Hebrides? The fact is, we in the UK will have to realise that we as a nation cannot accommodate more children of a different culture to us, and certainly not ones in competition for the space and education of our own. Facts are facts. There is a shortage of facilities of every sort now, and this will get worse, and despite the political Marxist left telling us that immigration and immigrants are good for us, it is plain to see from what is happening now that it is not. It is simply not working. It's working for the immigrants, however, who continue to invade us day after day. But if we, the indigenous population of this country, have to consider afterbirth abortions of our own whilst paying for the still living idiots of another culture in our own country, I would suggest there is something very seriously wrong in the state of Denmark. It must be acknowledged that abortion is too easy to obtain for us. The government in fact want to reduce the time a baby is viable to make it even easier. Euthanasia is being promoted for the indigenous sick and old, and child benefits are being taken away for a baby who is born to parents who get more than £60,000 a year into their home. Then we have the afterbirth killings. None of these apply to Muslim families. In fact, even to suggest they abort their idiots after they're born would incite racial hatred, and a few of these immigrants would reveal how much money they earn, so will continue to receive full child benefits. In short, there is one law coming for us and one law coming for them. And we as a nation are complicit in this simply because we don't do anything about it. Only in England could this happen. And finally, a bus-sized fatberg threatened London streets. The biggest ever build-up of fat and wet wipes could have sent raw sewage flooding into homes and streets in south-west London. Repairs have started after Britain's biggest ever fatberg, the size of a double-decker bus, was removed from a London sewer. The 15-ton mass of festering food fat mixed with wet wipes and sanitary products threatened to send raw sewage spurting into the leafy streets of Kingston upon Thames. "We've never seen a single congealed lump of lard this big clogging our sewers before," said Thames Water Waste Contract Supervisor Gordon Halewood. The sewer was almost completely clogged with over 15 tonnes of fat. If we hadn't discovered it in time, raw sewage could have started spurting out of manholes across the whole of Kingston. It was so big it damaged the sewer, and repairs will take up to 6 weeks. The foul blockage was discovered when residents of a nearby flats complained they could not flush their toilets. Investigators found the 70 by 48 centimetre sewer had been reduced to just 5% of its normal capacity. Mr Hailwood added, given we've got the biggest and best sewers, this is the biggest fatberg we've ever encountered. We reckon it has to be the biggest such berg in British history. Workers used high pressure jet hose to blast away the massive blockage, but the size of the fatberg meant it took them 10 nights of graft. Attached to the front of the hose is a stainless steel bomb, explained Graham Sanderson from Country Clean Environmental Services. This presenter says, if you've seen the picture, you'll understand this is the most disgusting thing ever. It also points to the fact that soon London will revert to what it was in pre-Victorian times, too full of people, which leads to disease and poverty. And most, if not all, are not British in any sense of the word. Talk about fast food and immigrant population bulge. How long will we have to clean up after these third world immigrants under the name of diversity? You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.